So let's say position 2 starts getting more clicks than position 1. Will that automatically eventually lead to position 2 replacing position 1?
Yeah, we go. You're an SEO already. You're an SEO already.
No,
Yeah,
try to
'cause-
understand. Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Number 1, you're brilliant at explaining. I'm really enjoying this. Number 2, I hope you have a free slot next week, because just I've done with some other guests who've really pushed the button in a good way. Most probably I'll ask for a part 2 and maybe a part 3. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the SiGMA podcast, where today we'll be meeting a new guest, Sean Bianco. Sean, thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
It's a pleasure to be here. You have a great setup.
Thank you. Sean is actually, he works with Game Changer, which for those who are familiar with the podcast, a few weeks ago we actually had Alan Brinkat from Game Changer, who was here talking about different jurisdictions, with his focus being also on particular focus on Brazil and the developments taking place over there. But with Sean, we're not going to jump into that subject. We're going to jump into a subject which I believe is very close to his heart. He's a bit of a guru on this subject, and it is SEO. And today's program is going to be a bit of SEO for idiots, like me, for example. Explain to me, in simple terms, what is SEO?
So when you are looking for something nowadays, marketing has changed over time. So previously you'd have to push a message onto people, push. SEO is more of just a placement and pulling people towards your domain and your message and your site. So what is SEO? SEO is optimizing a website to show up on the search results. So if we're doing SEO for people who don't know what SEO is, the biggest search engine right now is called Google. There are other search engines also. So there's Bing and a lot of other interesting ones which are coming up. There's also some interesting progressions with artificial intelligence, which are stealing people's attention. But if we go back on the topic of what is SEO, SEO is basically the practice of optimizing your website to rank at position 1, 2, 3 of Google. So think of the Google search results as a shopping street, right? And there's a certain shop that you could have in a particular position which gets more foot traffic because it's better positioned. And that is also...
Like, for example, like Starbucks always wants the corners, right?
There you go. There's always a corner, there's always people, there's always foot traffic, everyone passing. And it works in the exact same way on Google, that position 1 gets the most clicks, position 10 gets the least clicks, and then you can hide the body in between page 1 and page 2 of Google and get away with it.
Okay.
Because it gets no clicks.
Now you are confusing me. Let's go. I understood position 1, and I compared that to Starbucks when they want.
Correct.
To franchise, they always want corners.
Yeah.
Position 10 gets the least clicks. Position 1 to position 10, you can hide. What does that mean exactly?
So what I mean to say is that if you want to get away with murder, a very good place to hide the body will be in between page 1 and page 2 of Google. So that's when you click next, because not a lot of people go there. Yeah.
So what do you do over there? As in, is that part of search engine optimization, or is that would you want that or don't you want that? So would you hide? What would you hide over there apart from the body?
So typically, what you aim to achieve in Google when you launch a website. Google starts testing out your website, understanding what keywords are relevant to your website. You try to indicate...
How does Google do that, if you don't mind?
So they have large data centers which crawl websites. So when you launch a website, there are several ways that you can start getting found by Google, right? One of them is by releasing something called Google Search Console. This is a system that you place on your website for Google to be able to...
To find you,
but number 2... also for you to get some data on what's going on the search results on your website.
So this wouldn't be, for example, one of those beeper things, GPS locator. So Google Search Console is not, if you're in an emergency, if you're in the sea, you have a beeper GPS tracker.
So actually, Google Search Console can be an emergency tool for some people. So let's just say...
In what sense?
So let's just say that something goes wrong and your website gets removed from Google.
Okay.
So Google, at the end of the day, is a software. Okay. So sometimes they release updates and there are bugs. And when there are bugs, that could be your livelihood.
Could affect your
right?
website.
Of course, and it could affect your livelihood. So, I mean, we see it in real estate, Nutri-Pharma, we see it in the online casino space. If you're getting a significant amount of customers clicking on your search result and then all of a sudden you're gone as a language school, as an example, if people are looking to learn English in Malta, suddenly your website doesn't rank anymore. All of a sudden you stop getting those customers and they start going elsewhere. So there are certain scenarios where either you mess something up on the website or Google messes something up. And that's where you can actually request Google to re-index your website, meaning that it will crawl the page again and see if it's still relevant to place in the top position.
This is the second time you've used the word crawl. What do you mean by crawl?
So crawl is the, let's say, method of accessing a website as a robot. Okay, so it's called Googlebot.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a thing called Googlebot which goes out there.
So crawling is done by Google bots.
Correct. So
See, I'm learning as we're going along here, Sean. I told you.
it's an interesting, never-ending, and traumatic industry to be in.
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Number one, you're brilliant at explaining. I'm really enjoying this. Number two, I hope you have a free slot next week because just I've done with some other guests who've really pushed the button in a good way. Most probably I'll ask for a part 2 and maybe a part 3 with you.
I've got another part, so we keep going, right?
So we can keep it going. Mela, you've given me a lot of points. We've spoken about crawling and the use of Google bots, which was the last thing we discussed. Mela, I have to see which one I'm going to go first. Yes, you said Google Search Console can be a lifeline in certain instances. Mela, if, for example, you have, in the past, it used to be an unfortunate habit of, let's say, unscrupulous people based in some garage in a third world jurisdiction. And before Christmas, they would launch a DDoS attack on your website, which would shut you down. And for a gambling website, that is your lifeline gone in one of the busiest periods of the year. Would Google Search Console help in any way, or is it up to you, as in the operator, to fix that mess?
So, number one, if you are being attacked, let's be clear, and your site is down, you do need to set something called a 503, okay? So if there's anyone over here who is being attacked right now or who has been attacked, set a 503 server response code. What is this? It's telling Google that you're not available right now, but you will be back shortly. So in the eyes of Google, you could be down, you could be going through a system upgrade. It's not important, but you haven't disappeared. You are coming back, okay? So that's step one. Step two is that you should check on Google Search Console by running a manual index on the page what is actually being returned from the server to ensure that it's getting the right 503 error response. Now, I say this because no one controls Google, right? What we do is we have a list of different methods we've tried over many years, and some of them have worked and some of them have not. Okay.
So it's trial and error.
It's trial and error, and it's basically the hacker mentality to an extent of having a large net and testing everything out and seeing what has positive results and what has negative results and basing your analysis and correlations and your next strategies on that. Now, one of the things is also that Google doesn't crawl much from the European Union. It crawls mainly from the States.
Was that linked in any way whatsoever to data protection issues, or am I shooting in the dark here?
Well, I'm not Google's grandmother, so I can't say that. But
so why US and not Europe?
I wouldn't know that. I
would check this out for part 2.
Yeah, but there are certain instances where you would see crawls coming from different countries, but for the most part, we see crawls coming from the States. Now, this could be because it's a company based in the United States. It could be because setting up crawlers in multiple jurisdictions could be, and activating them consistently could be more expensive. I don't know. Yeah, but that's what we see from a pattern that mostly it comes from the States. So
does, if I may ask,
go ahead.
So does crawling have any data? This is now the lawyer in me coming out. Does crawling have any data protection issues in it?
So this is actually a really interesting topic. Now, there's this thing called robots.txt that you can put on your website. Okay. this is your instructions to the crawlers. And you can put a disallow, it's called, on crawling on your website, telling the bot not to crawl you. Now, the bots should respect this, okay? And in the case of Google and other large search engines, they do, yeah? But in the case of new search engines which are opening up, I'm not going to mention names right now because it's an AI-powered one and there's a whole court case going on about this and it's becoming quite, let's say,
What's the name of the
problematic.
court case?
I don't know the name of the court case,
Part
but I'll
two.
give it to you. Yeah, on part two. But I know the name of the company. I'm not going to mention
As
it
you're
right
talking
now.
right now,
Yeah.
I actually have an idea of a possible three-person podcast. Me, you, and JJ Gatt. Because you're
Okay.
bringing in AI now. And what you just said is you can give instructions to the bots so they don't crawl your website.
Correct.
But then it's up to the bots to
Correct.
obey those instructions.
Yes.
And I actually had a bit of an interesting discussion with JJ on this part, on what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and whether instructions are followed. So this could also be somewhere where to develop. I'm really enjoying this because you're really giving me a lot of ideas. But so we've spoken a bit about how ethical or not these bots can be.
But I can mention something else. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
As if fancy.
But it's important that we clarify also where Google and other search engines are running into issues. Now, as a website creator, you are rewarded based on the amount of people that land on your website and stay on your website and convert in whatever funnel you create, right? Whether you're selling ads, whether you're selling affiliate deals, whether you're selling products.
Yeah.
Now, what tends to happen, what has happened in the past, which Google has tested, were featured snippets, where they would take information from your website, they would place it onto the search results. So that's where you would, let's say, ask a question such as, where can I buy Rode mics from? Or what is the capacity of this thing, right? I don't know these technical terms, but you'd get the answer in the search results and you
Yes.
wouldn't even click on the website. Now that was coming directly from people's sites. So I was writing content.
Which Google was picking up and putting it in the search
Correct.
results.
Now, certain governments, I believe it was the Australian and the Canadian, if I remember correctly, didn't like that. And they started, because the news lobbies started saying like, okay, so we're publishing a lot of great content to generate traffic, to generate a business, while you're publishing this on your own website and people don't have to click to ours. Yeah, so effectively...
What's the difference between a well-researched journalistic article, which is that long, and 3 lines on Google search engine? I don't get it.
the click on your website, you are not getting rewarded for it. Google is placing your content on its website without your permission.
I think sometimes politicians read too much in certain situations. I think that actually makes life simpler
For the customer,
for
definitely.
the customer.
For Google, it makes them more money, for sure.
Yeah,
But what
okay.
about the publishers who are actually spending the time to write this content, to publish it, to optimize their website, just so that they don't get viewed, people don't see their brand, people don't read their content and even know that they're the ones writing it. So that,
So what? Okay, now we're going a bit from a SEO.
yeah.
Like you started, we're going to carry on. So what about ChatGPT,
So ChatGPT is...
which is picking from not just journalists but from authors?
So look, I'm not an AI expert, and I'm going to clarify on that. Yeah, I'm not an AI expert, but to my understanding, what an LLM does is it just picks the next best word, right?
What?
An LLM,
What's
a
an
large
L-
language model, which is basically what these artificial intelligence are based off. And let's be clear also, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, it isn't something which just started 2 years ago, as everyone thinks. It's been around for a long time.
Yes, it has.
Now, the difference is that it got democratized over the past 2 years. So
It's open.
anyone who can ask a question and formulate a sentence and then query the answer and start refining that over time could effectively start getting access to AI capabilities. That's what's changed, right? Now, my, let's say, analysis of AI is that it's extremely helpful. It's extremely good if you feed it data. If you base your queries of its own database without feeding it a data set, you never know if what you're going to get is the truth or not. It's not coming from a verifiable source. AI suffers from something called either delusion or hallucination. What is this? It is the lack of a, let's say, authority on top of it to say that this is correct or this is incorrect. So it has no idea if the information it's providing you is correct or incorrect. So we've seen Google implement AI into their search results. What does this mean? That instead of giving the top 10 list alone in the United States, they started giving these like featured snippets instead as AI answers. So I ask a question, tell me more about SiGMA in this podcast. And I will get the answer written by AI in real time.
Which is feeding off a source from...
Which is feeding off multiple sources and using all of that information to predict the next best word. The searches which were delivered in AI over the past 6 months has decreased by around 90% because the output of the results were so inaccurate. So they tested it, they tried it. There were some very embarrassing moments when you'd search for things and get answers which don't make sense. And now they're scaling back and trying to refine all of this. So I think AI is brilliant. I think with great power comes great responsibility.
Okay.
You can feed it the right data, query it the right way, and get really good factual information if you review it and refine it. That said, there is a responsibility over there. If you just ask a question and get an answer and post that on a website, and you're legally liable for the answer that is being provided, bear in mind that you might not get the best answers to your questions.
Okay. So, going back to SEO.
Yeah.
You spoke about placement and pulling initially. What do you mean exactly by placement? By placement as in where you rank, right?
Yeah.
And the pulling is how you attract the people to that rank. What does that mean?
Very good analogy. So over here, what we're talking about is the position is typically what gets the most clicks, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm going to walk down a corner, right, and I see a shop which doesn't have any kind of advertising on it versus a Starbucks on the next corner, I might stop at Starbucks and I might miss the other corner which has a lot of foot traffic, right?
Which might actually have better coffee than Starbucks.
That is very much true. Although I do think that Starbucks have great coffee. Not a lot of people agree with me on that. So. Yeah, there
I'm
we
not
go.
a fan.
I used to live in the States, so I know.
I lived a year in Rome, so it's a different reality.
Okay, there
for
we
me.
go.
For me, coffee is just a shot and get out.
Yeah.
I'm not into this mocha frappuccino, green tea, mocha, whatever.
Well, if you don't add 5 things, you're not at Starbucks,
No, that's not,
right?
that's not coffee.
So, yeah. And think about this analogy. So you have 2 corners, okay? You have people coming down these corners. It's the positions of Google. Now, on this corner, there's just a boarded up door. People might walk past it. On this one, there's a Starbucks. I guarantee you at least 35% of the people are going to stop over there and walk in. Now, that's the same thing with Google. If you don't have what's called an SEO title, which is your advertising text, so though that blue text that you see when you're searching, then you're probably not going to be able to give people the right message to attract them to your position. Although just by being at position 1, you should get a lot of the clicks. If position 2 has a better advertising text than you, they might take your clicks.
Okay, so let's say position 2 starts getting more clicks than position 1. Will that automatically eventually lead to position 2 replacing position 1?
Here we go. You're an SEO already. You're an SEO already.
No, I'm trying to understand.
So one thing which came out with leaks recently, which I mean, at the end of the day, no one knows if they're 100% correct leaks from the Google algorithm, which came out. No one understands if they came from Google themselves, who are always trying to manipulate the way that we do things. That said, SEOs like myself and a lot of good friends that I have in the industry that share a lot of information with each other have known that traffic is a ranking factor for a long time. Now, everyone within the space of search engine optimization who represents Google has denied this for a period of time. Now, what we have seen with these, let's say, leaks that have come out are, let's say, some validations on what we knew already, which was that there are trending effects on Google and twiddlers. There are certain...
Twiddlers?
This is what they call them, right? On their ranking factors. So there are these different ways where you can get social media traffic, where you can manipulate clicks, where you can follow certain patterns with real people or with bots to manipulate yourself at position 1 or at position 2 of Google. Now, do I recommend that you only do this? For sure not, because if everyone has a gun, then everyone ends up dead, right? So you do have to do a really good job of optimizing your website in all of the other ways. But traffic is becoming a more and more important ranking factor.
Okay, we have a few minutes left.
Sure.
Before we close off. So, spoke about placement and pulling. We spoke a bit about AI, which I want to pick up again. This famous Google algorithm. You hear so much about this Google algorithm. And I remember when I used to work in-house in a gaming company, the moment the Google algorithm changes a bit, you know how you realize? Because way down there where their office was, you could hear the swearing all the way to the door. Because they have discovered that the Google algorithm changed overnight. How does it affect that much?
So there are...
And I'm talking this about 5-6 years ago, so maybe it
and
affected more than it does today.
Yeah, and this has been the worst year for Google algorithms. And by worse, I mean not that there are the least amount of, but the most amount of changes that I've seen, at least in my career. And what we can say is this, that there are two main ways that people... Let's talk about the iGaming space, right? There are two main ways that people operate in the iGaming space when it comes to SEO. There are, and let's talk about affiliates specifically, right? Because otherwise this can go on all day. So there are...
I know it can, but we can't.
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. There are the churn and burn affiliates. What are these? These are the guys who manipulate the Google search results, buy expired domains, re-release AI content on them, Am I allowed to say bad words on this?
Push a ton.
Push a ton.
I was about to say another bad word myself.
Okay, so we go. Push a ton. I have to correct myself, right? Push a ton of low quality backlinks, and what this does is it can get you either no results, completely zero results, or it can get you really good results in a really short amount of time, and you can get burnt.
Yeah.
And these are the guys who operate under the pretense that, hey, as long as I make more money during the burning, before I get burnt, than I invested into the project, and all of the other ones which didn't succeed, it's all good. And those guys, they live in the wild, right? So
Cowboys.
Doesn't matter. Google update, okay, something new comes up, let's update, let's try something new. Either way, we're going to figure it out and we're going to churn and burn. Then there are the, let's say, longer term. Sustainable. And those are the guys who really get it at the end where, you know, in certain cases where it doesn't really go in the right direction for them. And it can be quite traumatic, right?
But in the long run, which method would you prefer?
Depends on the time, depends on what the goal is, depends on, you know, the situation. And
let's say
that's the best answer you'll ever get in SEO. It depends, by the way.
Okay. Let's say you want to create something,
yes,
which at the end of the day can either remain yours for life or eventually you sell off. Which model would you go for?
I personally always prefer going for the longer term visions.
Sustainability.
But keeping the costs under control.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like, I think in iGaming in general, there's like a cost problem.
Nowadays, yes, it's changed from...
Yeah.
I mean, you had that blip during COVID where everyone was closed at home and that led to...
Yeah.
But I sincerely hope for the sake of my mental well-being that we do not go through another period like we did go through with COVID.
100%.
That was horrible. I need to close off over here. We've
Perfect.
reached our 20 minutes. It's been brilliant having you here. I think we've actually overrun slightly. I'm looking at the cameraman and I think he's doing the calculation. Have I overrun? I have overrun. Sean, we're going to do this again. I really enjoyed it with you, and I think I've learned more in these 20 minutes than I learned in a couple of semesters.
Great, that's all I can hope to do. So pleasure to hear it.
Thanks a lot, Sean. And
cheers.
Cheers, and thank you so much. And we'll be with you again with Sean and with other editions of the SiGMA podcast in the coming days. Thank you so much.